In today's video, I show you the Legends of Darkshire Kickstarter. But before we get into today's video, just want to share with you what the GGGGs are for this month. Each month, Bob the Beholder picks some of my Patreon supporters to receive gratitude gifts. And for this month of December of 2024, we have 2 pledges for the Diverger Hold campaign. We have 5 pledges for the Dark Ages Medieval House. We have $100 going towards a crowdfunding campaign, which my Patreon supporters are currently voting upon. And then finally, we're having 2 pledges for this campaign, the Legends of Darkshire. Go ahead and use the link below to go to my Patreon page where you can find out more information on how you can get in on this month's gratitude gifts. It only takes $1. In this video, I do a walkthrough of the Kickstarter campaign, and I have a painting tutorial at the end of the video. Go ahead and use a timestamp below if you want to skip ahead to any of those sections. So I've done a number of review videos for DecoQuest. Matthew reached out to me once again with his latest project, which is this castle set, somewhat modular system that uses these a little bit less than 8-inch by 8-inch sets of squares that can clip together with open lock if you would like to. Or as you can see here, for the most part, I didn't clip them in so that I could move them around. But it is a huge set, as you can see here. At first, when he sent me the files, I said, well, maybe I can just print out a little sample like this gatehouse right here in the front. But after I saw how cool it was, I went ahead and wanted all of the files so that I could print out basically what he shows on his Kickstarter page. So it took me about 2 weeks with my printers running to be able to print all this out. I didn't keep track of how many spools I used. I know it was at least 8 spools of PLA because these walls are chunky. But I'm glad that I did it because look how awesome it turned out. This thing looks so cool. And in my imagination, this is Ravenloft Strahd's castle. Of course, it isn't according to specs, and I do know that there is an STL file out there that you can 3D print the actual Ravenloft that's in the 5e campaign. I didn't want to go that far because I know that thing is huge, but I wanted something at least that I could display some of my undead miniatures on. And this fit the bill perfectly because the theme of the castle isn't just any generic castle, but it is one that is perfect for the undead. It is creepy, it is crawly, it has a lot of these motifs that is a little bit on the scarier side. So that is perfect for showcasing not only my miniature of Strahd that I used when our D&D campaign went through the Curse of Strahd, but also a number of the undead army units that I already have. Now, I have the intention of printing out the one-page rules Vampiric Undead army, so I thought that this would be a perfect way to showcase that army once I'm able to print that out. But in the meantime, I think it turned out super well. And if you use my painting technique, then you are going to be able to paint this up really fast with some really cool effects. This time around, I did want to stray a little bit from my normal way of painting up terrain. And if you've seen a number of my previous videos, you know I have a super quick painting method that I use. But in this case, because everything was relatively stone, there wasn't really much wood mixed in, I did want to draw out some different colors out of it. So I experimented a little bit with different colors as underlayers so that it wouldn't be just a solid, boring gray. And I am really happy with how that turned out, where you just have subtle shades of this rustic red, as well as some green and a little bit of blue. And that just, those 3 different variations and shades just gave it a little bit more color so that it wasn't quite so boring. Again, stick around until the end of the video where you can see my painting tutorial. It is relatively quick. But this did take quite a bit of time for me to paint up, a week to do so because there's just so many pieces. But I'm glad that I did it because, again, I think it looks awesome. Now, these buildings do come apart so that you can go into the interior of the buildings and the grounds. There's a whole dungeon section as well. But to be perfectly honest, I didn't print it out to actually game in because I have a bunch of other modular dungeon systems that if I want to create layouts, I would much rather do that. And the walls are so chunky. I just can't imagine what kind of RPG that you would play, especially since it isn't gridded out. But I could see you using this terrain for some skirmish games where you do measure out with a ruler, distances, things like that. I could see you using that for skirmish games, not so much using it for RPGs like Dungeons and Dragons. But whatever floats your boat, I've always been super impressed with the level of detail and quality that Matthew produces with his STLs. And in fact, he produces so much quality and detail that whenever I import the files and slice it in my slicer, I do choose to simplify the model because there is more detail than what your printer can actually handle. And in fact, if you use Bamboo Slicer like I do, it will automatically prompt you and ask you if you do want to simplify the model. I always say yes. I choose medium, and it still comes out super, super good. I do print everything at 0.2 millimeter height at 5% infill just to save on filament. And that gives me enough detail that you can see here. It turned out great. Matthew does suggest with some of the more detailed pieces, like the statues, like the doors, to print at 0.1 millimeter height. But in all honesty, I went ahead and just printed all those at 0.2 millimeter height. Again, for me, with terrain, I don't need that much detail because at the end of the day, I want people to really focus in on the miniatures, and the terrain is a little bit of the background. So I think those settings are excellent to be able to print this whole set out. And as he mentions on his Kickstarter page, it is completely modular. You can move things around, shift things around. I just chose the configuration that was shown on his Kickstarter page because I wanted the same thing. This thing is so big, it doesn't even fit in the frame, but I do want to say that the tower goes up to 32 inches. And then in terms of width, with 4 tiles wide, it's going to be right under 32 inches, a little bit more than 31 inches. So that's the dimensions of what we see here. And each individual one of these is a little bit less than 8 inches square. So just keep that in mind in terms of your dimensions. But I do love the fact that it is modular, that you can move things around, change things up. And again, I'm going to be primarily using this as a set piece to showcase my undead army. One other thing about printing is that he does make the pieces separate from the floors, and that is so that you don't have to use the terrain on the floor pieces. Because I was never going to do that, I was never going to use the pieces without the floor, I went ahead and glued the pieces together digitally so that they all printed as one piece, except for pieces like this where there would be too much of an overhang. This I printed separately, but everything else I actually went into Microsoft 3D Builder, but you could use any STL file editor and just stick it on so that it prints out as one piece. I found that just to be easier than printing them out into 2 pieces, needing to glue them in later. So that's just a quick tip for those of you who don't want to print them out separated. And then finally, I didn't clip anything except for some of the pieces with the castle because I knew I wasn't going to want to assemble the castle without this whole section together. But other than that, I think it works super well to be modular and to configure it any way that you want. I do know that this is chapter 1, which means that there will be a chapter 2, that there will be expansions, which is exciting. Although at this point, this is so much terrain, I'm having issues with storage, so not 100% sure if I'm going to be printing out more because this is plenty for being able to display my undead army. Now let's go ahead and go over to the computer and I can show you what the Kickstarter page looks like. Go ahead and use the provided link in the video descriptions below to go to the Kickstarter page. And this project is going to end on January 12th. So you do have some time to be able to jump on if you are interested in this campaign. There is basically one tier. For about $62 US, you're going to get all of the files that you see here, which is a pretty good deal. And then if you're a merchant, it's going to cost about $260. There was an early bird where you saved a little bit of money, but that early bird period is over. So let's go ahead and check this out. His paint job, I think he used airbrush as well as some inks. to darken his up, but his set looks appropriately grim and dark. And then also I forgot to mention in my intro that you can put LED lights. It is slotted for those 2032 batteries, and you can just stick an LED light into it. It's pretty easy to do, not very complicated. I do prefer balloon lights. I think it's a little bit easier, but you can use and insert in these lights anywhere there is a lantern, which is what he's done. This is just an example of different kinds of layouts that you can do. And I think he printed out all the same ones that I printed out. So it's just showing you the modularity of all of the tiles and sets. You can go ahead and peruse that. Here's just a little bit of flavor text and then the 3D renders that are here. And one of the things just to note is that the scale of all of his buildings are pretty large. They're big. So you can actually shrink it down a little bit if you want it to be more true to 28mm. I find that it fits more like 40mm, maybe even 50mm in terms of scale. But for a project like this, I wanted to print out full scale just because I wanted it to look massive. So just a ton of variability that you can do just with the ones that I printed out. And of course, if you want more, you can just print out more of them. Here you have the same file, I think, back to back, just to be able to create a walkway here. And then, like I mentioned before, he did make it so that all of the buildings can be laid down onto the table without the floors. And again, because I have no plans of utilizing any of these without the floors, I went ahead and digitally cemented the buildings to the floor so that they could just print more easily at one go. And at a little bit less than 8 inches wide or deep, I was able to fit it onto my printers, my 3D printers. I'm not 100% sure what the size of the Mini is, but it is a little bit less than 8 inches to a side. It talks about all of the various prints that he did. So you can check that out as well. He did raise quite a bit of money so far, so there has been a good number of things that have unlocked. So I'm curious to see what these are going to look like. These are all of his previous campaigns, and again, I have come out with review videos for most of these campaigns. I did print out a set of this and actually did use balloon lights in order to have a light up sci-fi tabletop set. And yes, go ahead and peruse some of my previous videos if you want to see reviews of any of this terrain. This was his very first campaign that I printed out this massive tower and made a video of that. But he is going to fulfill in my mini factory, which that is where I store most of my 3D models. That way I don't have to download it onto my computer. And my video should be posted here as soon as I go public with this video. And that's it. So hopefully this video is helpful for you. Again, stick around if you want to see the painting tutorial, but hit that like button and subscribe, as I'm going to continue to come out with videos that not only showcase and review 3D prints for your tabletop wargaming, D&D playing, but also I'm going to soon be coming out with a video showcasing my game of the year for 2024, as well as some of my best 3D prints of the year. So subscribe so that you can be notified whenever that video comes out very soon. Otherwise, happy printing, happy gaming. We'll see you next time. First things first, I spray prime everything with this brown Krylon camouflage brown, and it's the sort of the darkest and most flat brown that I can find, and so this is my favorite go-to. If you don't get every nook, if you don't get every nook and cranny, that's fine. I print in black PLA, which really helps a ton cover any spots that I don't manage to spray prime completely, it doesn't really matter since black is a dark color anyway, and we want to spray on there the darkest color that we're going to use for our shading and shadows. So that's why I chose dark brown. You could use dark gray, which I've used on a number of other stone buildings before, but the reason why I chose brown instead of dark gray is because I want there to be a warmer color in the recesses to contrast against the cold gray that I'm going to put on top of this. So that's why I went with the dark brown, but you know, going with the dark gray could work as well. You could even do black, although that makes the contrast level super high. So I'm always a little bit careful using black as a base coat color, but you can choose whichever one that you want. I think brown ends up looking the best. I'm going to grab some Rookwood red, or this really rusty looking red color, and then I have a stiff hog's hair brush, and I'm just going to randomly hit up some of these spots. And do the same for here. Just random. I'm going to do the same for the building part. It is just totally random where you put it, like so. That's actually probably good enough. Right now I'm grabbing some light avocado, or this olive green. And I'm going to do the same thing, just dab some of this olive green in random places. And also on the building. Now we're taking this ultramarine blue I'm pausing here just to show you what it looks like once I put all three colors on there. It looks terrible, right? It just doesn't look good, but I just want to show sort of the pattern that you're going after. It looks a little bit like camouflage patterns, totally random, trying to break up solid surfaces and lines, and this is what it's going to look like before you put the gray on to tie it all together. So just keep that in mind. If it looks really bad, it's okay. It will totally transform once we paint. As you look over here to the final product, it is going to look really good. We're going to grab some zinc, which is a dark gray. Alright, so after taking a look, I think that the lightest gray isn't light enough. I feel like it's still fairly too dark. So I'm going to actually suggest that you skip that whole step with the mixing of the zinc with the slate gray. Instead, let's try it with the straight up slate gray without mixing it all. And don't want a lot on there because this is pretty bright. Might be a little bit hard to see. So it made it a little bit brighter. Okay, I'm grabbing some burnt umber. This is the darkest brown that I have. And using it to touch up on anything that's going to be rusty metal. Where I got some other paints on there. It's usually going to be around the edges where I got the dry brushing on there. So just touch it up. And it shouldn't take too long to do that. Okay, I'm grabbing some burnt umber. This is the darkest brown that I have. It's going to be rusty metal. Where I got some other paints on there. It's usually going to be around the edges where I got the dry brushing on there. So just touch it up. And it shouldn't take too long to do that. Grabbing some Canyon Orange or a deeper orange color. And you just want to stipple it randomly. See, my brush is all mangled up. You want it to be fairly bright. You can go over it if you need to. So something like that. Right, I am grabbing some metallic copper just because I want to make the roofs a little bit of a different color. But you can grab any other color that you want. And notice how I'm still maintaining some of the dark brown underneath. I don't want to make it like solid copper. Because again, that just gives it a little bit more depth if you do it this way. You don't have to use a mangled up brush like I have here. Just was lazy and didn't switch out my brush. Probably have a little bit more control if you didn't have a mangled up tip like this. But I chose not to paint. I wanted to keep these stone, but just do these parts, this copper color. And then I'm also going to do these piece up here as a copper, like so. So I'm going to finish that out. Alright, so this is what it looks like. I think it looks pretty good. I was a little bit worried that I wouldn't like the color, but I think in combination with the rusty parts, it's pretty close in color. I mean, obviously it's not exactly the same, but it's close enough in color that there's continuity between this copper color and the rust color. So I think I like that.